Thank you for the very convincing talk.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced now the connected cars are not near. But I would like to know your opinion. When do you expect connected cars to be on the roads? The real connected cars, self-driving cars, I mean.
So real self-driving cars driving around completely on their own?
Thank you.
I think we're not closer than 75 years.
Okay.
And let me say why. And there's a very good paper that came out in Scientific American on this June. So one accident every 40,000 miles, right, is good. But what you're getting is all the low-hanging fruit. You're getting everything that comes out of being able to map. So you've got, cameras and LiDAR and radar that are all giving you rich images, and you're taking that in and you're playing it through and you're analyzing it and you're learning from it. But there's no transition, again, to top-down, to causal understanding, right? So what the car companies are finding is that they were making very rapid progress. So from one accident every 5,000 miles, one accident every 10,000, every 20,000, and then it's just leveled off, right? So unless something changes, what we're going to see is, you might be able to drive up to a car parking lot and then get out of your car and press a button and the car will go park itself, because that whole area is maybe just self-driving cars, and the whole thing is set up with that. But the real full-on car that can go anywhere, so I mean, the other thing you might be able to see is highways, right? That if I have to drive, so for example, we very often drive from San Francisco to Los Angeles, 6-hour drive. The middle part of it is the most boring 3 hours ever, right? It's a terrible, terrible 3 hours, and it's just one straight line, with, and so that, maybe. Although even then, there are bad aspects of that road and the way people drive, et cetera, right? So, but you look at, I think, most people who are working in this area will say that what we're going to see over the next few years is a lot of enhanced driving cars, right? We're seeing that already. We're going to see a big impact to the way kids are learning how to drive. So the kids who are learning how to drive now, at least in the U.S., I don't know what the cars are like here, but most cars in the U.S. now have lane keeping, automatic braking, right, so they detect the car in front of them, and brake if the car in front of them brakes, all that. How is that going to impact kids who are going to learn how to drive this year, right? And then all the car companies are still trying to figure out what to do with that, right? So for example, we're working very closely with Nissan, and the new Nissans all have lane keeping, but it's wobbly, right? So it'll kind of do this. They're doing it intentionally. Which, when they first said it, I'm like, really? Yeah, they're doing it intentionally so that people don't over-rely on it, and so that you're still learning how to correct, right? That might be gone in 2 years, right? That's an experiment. They're just saying, does that work, right? So, but I think if you look, again, at what it would take to get to one accident every 1 million miles, we're nowhere near it. And all we've gotten is the early part of that curve, and it's flattening out, right? Now, there could be some huge technology change, but none of the work is going in the direction that shows like a quantum leap that would get us there.
Thank you for your good presentation. I am Tapio Pohjalainen from the VTT, and I would like to ask, if all the cars would be autonomous and you would not have the error generators like humans, would that be much safer?
That's a good question, right? So again, we're saying humans are error generators, right? And yet humans crash about once every 1 million miles, right? Or have a serious accident once every 1 million miles. And at least in the U.S., the proportion of that has to do with alcohol intake is high, right? So a lot of it is, so humans are error generators. But like the first death in a self-driving car was the Tesla one, and that had nothing to do with another human. That was a failure of detecting things in the environment, right? So, and so again, if you look at the research that's out there now, and there's not a lot of it, right? But on the types of accidents that happen, it's not clear that the bulk of them are actually from, that are caused by humans, as opposed to, basically a failure that is the accidents that I'm in that are caused by another human versus the ones that I cause, right? Like driving into a tree, right? Like if I by myself, I'm not paying attention, or I fall asleep and I drive into a tree. Well, what's the proportion of those that happen to a machine? And so far, it does not look like the machines are actually making progress in that direction either, right? So now, part of the reason that the data is not available is that none of this data, of course, Google isn't releasing this, right? I mean, if Google and presumably Apple, right, because they're working on their self-driving car, or all the companies, if they were to release this data, it would be an incredibly rich source of exactly answers to this, right? But I think that the real, I mean, in a way, the real answer is driving is you're working in a very large, complex, non-deterministic system, right? And even autonomous cars by themselves, how often would they not be able to detect that a lane changes, or that something, the failures of sensors, et cetera, right now. So right now those numbers are nowhere near as good as humans.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Kamal. I'm a student here at Alto. Thank you very much. It's very interesting talk, and it's always interesting for me actually to see these contradictions in the AI world of the general people, how they see the AI world driven by the media and celebrities, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Ray Kurzweil, and all those celebrities. We say that at some point in the future, machine would actually get as smart as human. And then every time I see, I attend this talk with an actual AI expert, or read some article from those who are actually working on the AI field, they always say the otherwise, just like you. They said that AI is working, in a different direction of the compared to the human intelligence. But my question is, don't you think that all that we have right now, that you said that the autonomous system actually increased the need for more people to work on it? But don't you think it's just because right now we are in the transition phase toward the actual fully autonomous system? Eventually, sometimes in the future, maybe we will actually have a fully, autonomous intelligent system, and us people would get liberated or unemployed, maybe. Or what do you think about it?
Well, so that's the heart of the question. That's the same thing in a sense you asked, right? So, and really that is the point of this. So the point of the point I've been trying to make really is that intelligent systems are progressing in a particular direction, and then you have the nature of human intelligence, and reasoning. And maybe in some ways you could almost leave the humans aside, but let me take the human part for a second, right? Humans aren't general intelligence. That's part of the kind of the mistake that we made, right? That we make in general. We think of humans as we're trying to get artificial intelligence to be like humans. We're completely non-general. We are a very specific set of solutions to the kind of problems that evolutionarily we have encountered, and not only we as humans, but we as every other animal, because our brain is the sum of, right? We still, our interactions physically with the world are very much like those of a dog, maybe a little worse than those of a dog, right? And so we humans are not general intelligence. We're a weird, narrow thing that has been defined by surviving in this physical environment relative to certain kinds of predators competing with other humans, right? We're not general intelligence. We're not general problem solvers. Right. Now, again, intelligent systems are progressing in a different way. Also, so unless we think that somehow machine intelligence is somehow going to become like the Ray Kurzweil thing, right? That it's somehow suddenly going to become like general intelligence. It's also not progressing it's not progressing in the same direction that that humans are on this point. It would be, we haven't found a way to do that. But again, it's not progressing toward general intelligence. So what it means is that at least the way I think a lot of AI people see it today, the world as it is, non-deterministic, complex, blah, blah, requires a combination of the kind of bottom-up pattern analysis, the top-down, adaptive behavior. And there's nothing right now that suggests that just on the machine side that you're going to be able to automate or make autonomous really complex systems that work in the real environment, right? So at NASA, so right now I'm on a team, it's about 12 of us, shaping what's supposed to be the new program for aeronautics for the United States called the Autonomous Systems Project. And one of the elements is ab initio, right, which is blank slate, right, you know, from the start, right? So, and the whole idea was this: what if right now you got rid of all pilots, all air traffic controllers, and the whole system was autonomous, right? Because to your point, right? So how much is the challenge that we're in a transition from humans to not humans? And it's possible. I mean, you know, it's an empirical question, but I guess my hypothesis and what I'm arguing here is that there's no more reason to think that autonomous systems are going to be able to run a whole thing in complex environments based on where we are now. You know, then, you know, so if that's the case, if we think that, you know, that the way it's progressing right now for intelligent systems, they're not going to be able to cope with really complex environments, even if you get rid of all the humans. Then it's the teaming that becomes interesting, right? You know, and how do you, you know, and that's not a short-term solution or a transitional solution. It's a longer-term solution where you're replacing a lot of humans. You're taking humans out of the equation, but you're moving humans into the increasingly higher order, cognitive, strategic, maybe, right? But yeah, I'd say right now, if you look at self-driving cars, you look at what's happening in aircraft, in factories, everywhere. Nowhere do you really, again, from what I'm seeing, do you see evidence of systems that can really function in complex environments in the adaptive way that humans do, right? And you know, and not only that, you're not even seeing the beginning of it, right? You're seeing low-level bottom-up pattern analysis, which is powerful, but only solution to certain kinds of problems.
We have one question here and next to here and here.
Okay, my name is Ruslan, and I have a philosophical question. In the beginning, you told about the technological singularity. So, when do you expect it, and if it happened, which kind of regulation or I don't know should we make or take to control this process or overcome this process in a right way?
So, okay, so good question. So the question was, you know, what do I think about when the singularity is coming and what we do about it? So, again, I think as you've heard me say, so I don't think it's coming anytime soon. And not only that, the part where I think like that the singularity concept is wrong is, I'm trying to think of like a way to capture this, right? So recently there's a science fiction writer who talked about the fact that he'd done a bunch of research on deep space missions, right? And basically said humans are never really going to be able, and you know, this may be wrong, right? But humans are never really going to be able to spend, like, you know, we're not going to be able to expand into the solar system the way we think, right? And 2 or 3 reasons, right? So one was gravity, radiation, and you know, the other interesting one was the kind of microbiotic environment that we all have, right? So you know how it says, like, I forget what the proportion is, but the proportion of non-human DNA in each of our bodies is like, what is it, like 10 to 1 or something, right? Like we have there are more non-Alonso cells in my body than Alonso's, right? Like, because now, if I go into space and I get sick and I take antibiotics, I kill them all. Here, you know, I get them back pretty quick, right? I eat some yogurt, you know, rub myself around in some dirt, and then because it's all around me, right? So that plus, you know, different gravities, plus, again, the space radiation environment. So what, you know, he was making the argument that going to Mars is really a gardening experiment. You know, we're going to try and grow some things, but humans long-term can't live in environments like that. The flip side is, and this is the part that I find more interesting, is we don't realize, we think of humans as, you know, and again, remarkable brain, you know, as I described and everything, but we think of ourselves as this, you know, general intelligence, as adaptive, as like, you know, maybe some element of like, we're kind of some part of the singularity, but no. we're an incredibly specific solution to this environment, physically, cognitively, and so we're very tied to it. You know, you can't live that long underwater either, right? Like the astronauts who go down at 75 meters, they spend 2 weeks there. It's hard, right? You're 2 atmospheres. So we're very, very carefully tuned to this environment, and I think that and this is opinion, right? I mean, at this point, right? The singularity Kurzweil is guided. So my opinion is, I don't think we even understand what is general the thing, right? I mean, you know, it's entirely possible that there is no such thing, and I don't think Kurzweil has gone at all in any direction to define what that is. So I don't know. So yeah, so I'm not worried about it.
Hi, thank you for the great presentation. My name is Siavash. I'm a doctoral student at Alonso University. I'm interested with regard to the robotics, like what are the latest developments in that area, and what does that robot which NASA, you showed it, sent to ISS, is actually doing? Because initially it was expected to do something, but then it was disappointment. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything about that. Well, you're exactly right. So I don't know what the lesson is from that, but you're right. So Robonaut was initially designed with 2 purposes. So it was co-funded by General Motors and NASA, and General Motors was interested in it because, in some ways, there are certain things that are on the factory where you want to really still replace what a human's doing, right? In the end, General Motors has given up on this too, right? But this was exactly the concept on, so it kind of goes back to the same theme, right? When NASA needed to repair the Hubble telescope, right? Remember the Hubble telescope was the one where the mirrors weren't quite lined up properly? A lot of people said, why don't you just send up a robotic mission to fix it, right? And because NASA had never done, so NASA would take the shuttle and go up to the space station and back, or take the shuttle and just release a satellite, right? NASA hadn't tried to go, Hubble was further out, right? And then to actually get near this thing and use the shuttle to replace it, none of that had been done before. It was risky, right, to send humans. But there was no way to do it without humans because the Hubble telescope was made to be, it was assembled by humans, and so it's actually very hard later to create a robot that does the things that a human did, right? So that's, in the end, what they had to do. That was the idea behind Robonaut. So the idea behind Robonaut was create this, robotic, upper, now they're trying to give it legs, that has like the dexterity that can work. The problem with Robonaut has been that AI systems aren't there, so you can't actually. So even though it looks like a human, look, the astronauts can't actually. Its sensory systems are poor. It sees the world in a very blurry way, and even if you improve that, you wouldn't. You'd be able to say, "Can you please hold this?" Right? I mean, it's remarkable when you have 2 humans working together, the interaction, right? And there's lots of research on that, right? And 2 humans who've worked together for a while, or even humans who've never worked well at all before, right? If you and I had to suddenly go do a task of cleaning up here, we wouldn't bump into each other. We would be, even though I've never been here before, right? All of that is very difficult, right? So the real problem, you're right, with Robonaut has been that it focused on the robotics of it and the interacting in a small environment, but it's not very useful. And in not being very useful, it just takes up space in the space station, and I think they just want to jettison it.
Hello, I'm Jan Brax from Aalto University. So you were talking about use the mic.
All right.
Keep it closer to your mouth.
Okay.
Now can you hear me? Yes. So back to space. You said we are here, a solution for Earth system, and definitely we have a huge advantage here. And replacing the humans, I think we don't really want ourselves to be replaced. But space, this is hard. How do you see how far it is to have an actual small, maybe these ants, or something on Mars? Because Mars settlement by humans, this is really far-fetched thing. But can we have something like autonomous systems for space exploration, so autonomous that they are starting to be more useful, and we can run smaller sort of mission centers behind it, and they just go and collect and do things?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think a lot of future missions have that plan, right? That NASA used to call it faster, better, cheaper, and everybody used to say, no, you can only have 2 out of 3, right? But the faster, better, cheaper was exactly that, right? So just you increase the risk, that's the cheaper. But if you put out a lot of little things like little robotic ants, swarms. There are lots of mission concepts that are considered like, basically little flying robots around Mars. The atmosphere's a little thin, but and so, I mean, one thing to think about is, again, probably at some point we will send humans to Mars, right? Part of the nature of human exploration, and partly because, again, it pushes so many things here on Earth, right? I mean, that's kind of like really, if you think about NASA, right? Everybody, people ask me all the time, well, couldn't that money be used better, right? I don't know why people focus on NASA and think that like the money could be, our money could be, some other money could be used even better, right? But still, like, there's this image that with the Mars exploration rovers, like that first rovers mission cost about $1 billion. And you always picture putting $1 billion on a rocket and sending it to Mars, right? No, salaries on Earth, it's a lot of, all the technology basically stays on Earth, right? You send that thing up, but everything you've developed, every advance in batteries, every advance in intelligent systems, in mobility, in sensor detection, all of that is obviously advances that stay, right? So it's an investment locally. But in the long term, really so going back to the Mars rovers again, do you remember, so the Mars exploration rovers, those two, they landed by inflating balloons around them, right? And so, it came down, and then it slowed down just enough, and then it hit, I think the expected bounce was something like 8 meters, 10 meters, right? And it's a big thing, right? And heavy, right? So huge balloons. Then for Mars Science Laboratory, actually, so the Phoenix Mars mission was a controlled entry, descent, and landing. It landed, and it was a polar lander. The problem with controlled entry, descent, and landing, the science fiction landing, right, is where the spacecraft comes and just lands itself, is that it creates a big plume of dirt, and it gets into everything, and it screws up your machine. And so that one didn't matter because it was just a lander. It wasn't a rover. It didn't have to go anywhere. So they landed it like that, and then it had a bunch of sensors. It did things. It drilled into the ice. But the rovers, you can't put dirt around it, so that's why so for Mars Science Laboratory, the 2011 mission, much bigger vehicle. But why didn't we bounce it with balloons again? In part, people say because, it was so much heavier that it would have probably created a giant crater. But the other reason is, every mission you change, because the missions are in part about doing things differently. It is about learning, right? So Mars Science Laboratory, you probably all remember this, right? It was called the Sky Crane. So it came down through the atmosphere, it opened up, and I'm trying to remember. So you had the capsule, they jettisoned the bottom part, they jettisoned the top part, then you had the part that's containing the rover, and finally at about 25 meters above the surface, right, it had some retro jets that fired, stabilized the platform over the surface, lowered the rover up, opened up in the air. But the rover the size of a car, and then I brought it down with a little wire, and then the thing went off and crashed, right? And I remember I worked 2 years on that mission, like doing the planning systems, right? And I thought, this is the craziest thing. Why are we doing this? Right? I mean, everybody works so hard on these missions, and this is never going to work. And it worked, but the reason we do it is to learn, right? And so, to your point, I think that's what's coming is going to be sending up something that basically lands a bunch of little spacecraft that all go around. But I think we're still going to stay on the path of human exploration too. It opens up other parts of discovery, unless we discover something particularly, something that would make it impossible to go to Mars, but it doesn't look like it, right? So I think both paths, but certainly every mission that NASA does, and I think, as increasingly really the international community does, is about learning a whole new set of things. So I think we're going to go the faster, better, cheaper.
Okay, I think we have exceeded by a couple of minutes our time, and so I'll ask the last question that I have had since the beginning. So we have this concept of collaborative or co-creative intelligence that in the extreme also included different animals there in combination with the automated systems and humans. So, and how do you see that? So in your presentation I saw different roles for humans. So they are new problem solvers, they are improvers of processes, they are cheaper in certain places, and as a safety driver they are the legal liability takers. And so how do you see, is this legal liability taker the main role of humans, or is it and should we use the ants as was proposed, or should we? I remember the documentary from the 60s from NASA that in fact chimpanzees are much better fighter pilots than humans. They do the quick solutions better than humans, so what is your view on this kind of teaming?
Yeah. So let's see. There's a researcher at Georgia Tech who did recently a study with pilots, and this is commercial airline pilots, and they reported, and it was actually quite a nice study, so very specific. So pilots will report that pretty much 1 in 5 flights they do something that is outside of the they have to correct something that if they didn't correct it, there would be an accident. 1 every 5 flights. And again, similarly with cars, so we're getting self-driving cars that are being able to go really quite long ways without accidents. And yet it's nowhere near humans yet, right? So nowhere near. And so the question is why? And it's that same reason, I think, that where humans are good and where a chimp wouldn't be as good is not in the everyday driving boring, right, or the normal flying. It is in the problem solving that you get very unusually. It's at the edge cases, right? And so where things will probably go over the next 20, 30 years. And I think that the companies and the researchers and that basically go in this direction are the ones that will be on, basically on the success path, is assuming that we're going to push humans to deal with the edge cases, right? Because again, that's what we're good at. All the routine stuff, all the stuff that kind of, it takes the bottom up, so keeping the car in the lane, so supporting humans, and that's in the low level stuff, but even in the higher level cognitive stuff, providing the right information at the right time. I mean, that's what that ship doesn't do, right? So that ship does a lot of things by itself, but the problem for all the humans was they have no idea what it's doing because it was developed like a caged robot, right? It was not developed to communicate, to interact, so there's no transparency of the intelligence, there's no communication of state. So all those things make it hard. That's the direction. And then, so the remnant thing is that humans are remarkably able to deal with situations that we haven't encountered before and solve those problems well. And that's the edge case. And that's where I think that right now there's no evidence that our intelligence, that our artificial intelligence is going there. And so I think that to the extent that we develop our technologies to support, increasingly the humans and the things, where we're, not so good at attention, right? We have single-threaded attention. We have very limited working memory. We have very limited access to long-term memory, all these things, right? And yet we're incredibly good, again, adaptive problem solvers. That's the balance that we want to get, right? How do you push humans out to those edges, that's what humans are doing, and do it in a way that's almost transparent to the humans because we don't like being interfered with, that kind of thing. That's where I think if our focus as technologists is there, I think that's how, that's where the real advances will be. Not in technologies that are just doing things by themselves. I think those will cause more and more of these issues of having systems that cost us to put more humans on the situation rather than fewer. So, and I I want to say, by the way, thank you. These are all very good questions, and I appreciate everybody staying.
Okay, with this positive views scenarios, we finish this event here, and let's give a big hand to the